Hi, I'm artist Rob Reep and welcome back to my YouTube channel. You know, painting a mountainscape or a grandiose ocean scene, that sometimes can be relatively simple because the beauty is just so self-evident. But can we take a scene that's relatively unimpressive and turn it into something really pretty, and better yet, do it on a small canvas? Well, that's what we're going to be doing today. We're actually going to be taking a photo that I took of a little creek in near my hometown, and it's got a huge bluff over here on this far right side. We're going to take this. It's a woodland scene, which is already a bit of a challenge for me. There's not a ton of background in this as well. We're going to see if we can turn it into something really pretty and unique. Today we're working on an 8x10 linen canvas panel. I start off with just a basic sketch from drawing from the picture that I've taken. And this is, again, a little bit different shape than what I would normally take on. This one's going to have some really abstract masses within it. I draw actually the kind of the cliff face that's closest to me to start off with, just to establish the sheer size. I'm already thinking about fitting this into my rule of thirds. And this first cliff face is actually going to drop down. It looks like when you draw it out, it's going to drop down right in the center, which you would think would be bad. But you're going to have a lot of ground, of course, on this back side, which is going to really just take that out of the equation. So this is the back side of the bluff face that I'm drawing now. It's a very large drop-off that we're dealing with. And I'm not going to draw in every single detail. I'm using a soft vine charcoal for anybody that's interested. That's typically what I use to draw off something if I'm going to sketch it out. You'll see a lot of artists who will actually sketch this out with oil paint thinned down, something like a sienna or an umber. But since obviously I do a toned wash of that similar color to start off with, I like to use charcoal. That's actually, charcoal's kind of brought over. I brought that over from my very short stint of using acrylics. I would use charcoal to sketch out my shapes. So that's kind of where I got that from. That does come from a little different side of my painting background. We got a large mass over here on the left side. Another big drop off into this little stream or creek. I don't want to call it a stream because it's not a river. This is very much a creek, a little southern creek. The biggest difference in this creek is it's not as muddy as most in our area. This one, you could actually see the rock bottom that it had, kind of a gravel bottom is what I would call it, and that's natural to this part of the country. Now I'm changing the picture up a little bit. The initial picture had the ground on the left side coming all the way into the final perspective from where I was standing when I took the photo. I'm going to change that a little bit and kind of put myself within the kind of hovering over the creek itself, which I think will be a nice little change just compositionally. Feel free to always alter things. Even if you're painting directly from something that you already see in nature, feel free to move things. There's going to be several little things within this painting that I'm going to alter from what we were actually looking at. Now, what I'm doing here, I'm drawing little drop downs. The cliff face comes down, and it's not rock, it's dirt. It's got some rock in it, but it's a clay almost, and a lot of it is got that telltale sign of a creek, which has been tearing up the ground around it, and that's get these little drop-off shapes where there's really no grass or anything like that growing above those marks. That's where you would have some grass and some dirt in those areas, and then down below you just have the clay that kind of falling off into the creek water. I think that's basically all the sketch I'm going to do at this point. Time to start moving into the painting portion and start laying in some color. going to be very conservative here early on with my colors. I want to make sure that I don't overpower with darks or lights. So I've got just a muddy mixture here, and I'm not going to go through most of my videos. I don't really explain a ton of the colors that I use, and part of that's for the reason that I want you guys at home to get used to using your own intuition when it comes to developing colors. And I'll be very honest, I do not own a color wheel. I've never had one. I've simply used my own instincts and trial and error when trying to develop color combinations. There is never a set recipe. Now you can say, well, I want a dark, muddy, almost black color. I can mix, ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, and dioxazine purple. But there's other ways to get to that, and there's other ways to slightly alter that. So you don't want to become too reliant on formulas. You want to be able to just move with it, and that's kind of how I feel connected to my palette, is that I don't worry about color recipes. It's just a matter of going with it. Now again, I do not, even in the studio, I don't use a ton of colors. That may change at some point in my career. I may get to where I want to use more and more colors and keep adding new colors to my painting arsenal, but for now I'm pretty minimal. I basically have my plein air palette, which is, you guys can tell I've got white, burnt sienna, Van Dyke brown, ultramarine blue, Prussian blue, sap green, and dioxazine purple on the top, and then I'm working with cad red deep and cad yellow deep. It's very, very minimal. It's very primary, and that's all you really have to have. You can come up with most everything. Now, there are always colors that will enhance, especially if you're doing a large piece. If you're doing large paintings, which I've done before, and we may get into some more large pieces. We may start working on some really large paintings. And if you do that, then yeah, you may want to add some other colors. But if you're working on a scale of an 8x10, you don't want to go too crazy with it. It will just confuse the eye. So yeah, just kind of be careful and hang out with these different colors and let it move. We are going to be using some additional painting materials within this painting that I'm going to kind of throw in here, and there's really only two of them that we're going to use. So if you are painting along with me, I just want you to go ahead and be sure that you have them. You don't have to have them. This painting could be done without them, but I think it will improve the final painting. For the water, we're actually going to be adding liquid, which will remain relatively glossy once this painting is oxidized completely. That'll give a nice little sheen to that water that I'm kind of looking for. Of course, my final varnish will do some of that as well, but my water will have that liquid texture to it. It'll have that liquid look. And then for the trees in this, we're going to be adding something that I've just started working with. We're going to be using Gamblin's cold wax, cold wax, which is basically a mixture of beeswax and Gamsol, which I'll thin it down a little bit with a little bit of Gamsol, but that's going to actually create a matte finish for the trees. It'll thicken up that paint a little bit there. They won't be really easy to paint, I don't think, but we are going to give that a shot. Now I'm just adding some very blended and scrubbed in textures of plants in that background. Now starting to work on the bluff face, the bluff edge at the very background. Feel free, if you're watching this and you're enjoying my content, please be sure and hit that subscribe button if you're not already a subscriber. And even if you are a subscriber, hit the bell icon. That will just make sure that you get notified whenever I have new videos available. Also, be sure to leave a comment. Let me know what you guys are painting at home. I want to know what's going on in your lives, and I also want to I want to encourage you that if you're having trouble with a particular thing that you're working on, drop it in the comments. I might do a video about it. I may just respond to you in the comments and try to help you out as much as I can. And I know a lot of you guys out there, I'm going to be completely honest, a lot of you that watch my show are much more experienced and have other insights that I don't have. So please, hey, if you see something like, hey Rob, I think you could improve this, feel free to. I'm more than willing to listen to constructive criticism. I know that this painting is going to be different. I do want to kind of hit that out there right off the bat. This is first of all, I'm oversaturating the colors. The initial photo that I took this is obviously still a winter to early spring type shot. So we're going to have some green leaves in it, but overall this is still not going to have much color in it. So what I've done is I've gone in on my computer after I took the photo and I've oversaturated the colors, which is going to give me a really vibrant water base. It's going to have, the sky's not going to be super vibrant, but certain aspects of this painting are going to be more saturated than they probably were in real life. So I'm trying something new here. And I'm going to push my limits a little bit today. This is a painting that honestly, when I finished it, I'm still, even as I record this, and I've seen the final product already, maybe or maybe not. It may be something that I don't want to do again. It may be something that I do want to take on again. It's time to start working on this large cliff face, the one that's closest to us, and it was a struggle for me to get the colors spot on initially, so that's just going to be a building of layers. If I was doing this on a large canvas, let's say I was going to take this on either anything from like an 18 by 24 to, or maybe even a 16 by 20 up to a 48 by 60, anything in that size range, I'm probably going to be painting this in segments. I would let certain aspects of this painting dry before I moved on, but doing this on an 8 by 10, it's one of those paintings where I'm painting it, as I've done several in the past. I'm doing it in an alla prima fashion, which just means I'm painting it all at once, or as some of you would call it, wet on wet. I'm going to try not to work too much paint wet in wet, but there's going to be some parts of it that have to be done that way. Others, I just want to be pretty planned out of where I want certain layers and where I don't want others. And this is kind of one of those spots where I'm having to plan that out. I'm leaving a space in here because I'm going to have some big shadows of trees on this left side. They're going to be casting onto the right side of the bluff face. So I'm having to plan that out already. Alright, what we're going to do for this video that's going to be different from the way I've done some of my past videos, I'm going to actually go ahead and we're going to fast forward through some of this without doing it in a sped up fashion. So what I'm going to do is actually we're going to blend into another scene. But you guys can tell what I've done from step to step. And if this is a format that you like, again, I'm still working on refining the format of these videos, because this was about a 2-hour painting, and I just don't want you guys to have to sit through 2 straight hours of silence or me talking and commentating this. And I want to commentate the important parts and not the others. So right now I'm just laying on some final highlights onto this cliff. We'll do a few more here in a little bit, but there's some stratification in this area that I need to work on. There's going to be some red tones as well that I've got to pick up. Just changing that color slightly, we're gonna really raise the bar and get some real bright colors in here. This is not pure white. Once again, this is a bit of the muddy mixture that I had mixed with a good bit of white. The left side is going to be very dark, but on this side we've got light pouring in. This photo was taken late afternoon, so I've got a lot of sun starting to pour on to this eastern facing bluff. So this whole right side is going to be relatively lit compared to the left, which will all be in shadow. I'm using broad strokes at this point, still just laying in masses of color. Adding a little bit of Prussian blue and dioxazine purple to get the shadow color. Now, I didn't really clean my brush. I'm just moving directly into this. And remember, I said I left some space. That's what I'm doing now. It's just starting to lay in these big, huge shadows. These are some. Actually, there are oaks that grow this close to the water in this particular spot. So these are big shadows cast by large oak trees, which we'll paint in a little bit later. And watch how the shadow shapes move as the cliff changes shape. That's really important. They're very straight, and then they just cut down with the shape of the ground. Now, it's important to remember that when you're painting a shadow, your shadow color is normally going to be brushstroke wise going in the same direction as the ground itself, because it's not the shape of it is not the shape of the tree. The shape of it is the shape of the ground. You're only getting the color change from the object that's casting the shadow. We're going to darken the shadow color as the shadows get closer to us. And the lines become a bit more defined in this area. And so that's simply because they're closer to the foreground, and we're getting a more focused look. You really have to look at your focal points and decide where things are going to be. Now, my main focal point is actually going to be left of center. And it's going to be in those trees that are the three really big trunks that I'm planning on putting in on the left side, which are, you guys are going to see here in a few minutes. So that's going to be my general focal point, but because they're directly opposite of the shadows that I just painted in, if you think about a camera, and when you twist a camera, you're going to get a focal distance. And so anything that's in that distance with your object is going to be in focus as well. That's why you have different lenses for cameras. That's so you can get different focal lengths. And so these shadows that are directly opposite of the trees that I'm going to have in focus, these shadows are a bit more in focus than the ones in the background. I need to lay in some more very scuffed in, or there's other words for it. You could call it scrubbed, or not mottled, but those are, you can just come up with your own term, I guess, for it. But there are certain terms for this. Scumbling would be another term. Scumbling in these little shapes of background leaves and trees. Again, almost kind of, this is between winter and spring here. There's just a few trees starting to leaf or leaf out or bud out, whatever you would call it, and we need to get those in. But again, not much definition, not much shape to those. We've got this huge dark mass on the left side, and it's very simple to paint that in. Big broad strokes, just go with it. I'm using a number 3, but the reason it's laying number 3 bristle, the reason it's laying in these colors so quick is just that this canvas being an 8x10 size makes the brush look pretty large, but relatively small brush. I might even use something smaller at times. Something bigger at times, but I'm pretty comfortable that on a canvas this size with a number 3. I am changing my colors slightly as I move throughout this, but I'm just getting a big mass of color, and I'm going to slightly change it as I move forward, but for the most part, just a big mass of dark color. I'm adding some liquid, getting some sap green in here, and I'm going to draw or paint in just a very blocky shape of dark color in the water to start off with. And what I'm doing here is I'm planning that I'm going to have a tree right above this, kind of hanging out over. So I just need some dark mass. Now, this is going to change a good bit as we move through it, but we are going to just start having some darker colors within this little creek. But again, I've added liquid just to ensure that this will have a bit of a glossy surface to it. Time to add the sky. Now you do not want to go too crazy with this color. If you get it too blue, it's going to look fake. So what I've done, I'm adding Prussian blue. I've actually got some Van Dyke brown in this thing, some burnt sienna, and then a hefty dose of white. And I may even lighten this up some more. When I finished this, it looked a little white to me. So just paint around those little leaves, paint inside them, blend those colors a little bit. It's going to give you a nice look. Using that same color, we're going to go down into the water. Now the whole left side of this water is in relative shadow, but it's going to have a really nice blue tone to it. Even though this is southern Arkansas muddy water, the photo that I took had this brilliant blue in it, and I just loved the way it looked. It turned out so wonderful. So I'm going to add a little ultramarine in some places just to start to give this some water look and some changes in color. But it's a very simple shape to paint in, and with water's a difficult thing for me as an artist when we're talking about small canvases. Now you get me on a large canvas and I can make water look awesome. Smaller canvases are difficult for me. I'm going to go ahead and throw that out there and tell you guys that I'm constantly twiddling with my style, and this is it's something that I'm still trying to perfect. This is some newer stuff that I'm working on. So in the initial stages of this water, it's not going to look like much, but we're going to get there. It's going to have a very bright lit side on the right, so I don't want to get too far into that with this blue. But I do think this is a unique color combination for this creek. I cleaned that brush and I moved back into a similar color that I was using for the brights of the Bluff. And there's going to be changes of light. We're going to have some stronger yellows and just some different variations of color in this water. But I'm starting off with this brighter tone, and just going to work this whole right side and try to match just the little shifts of color that I see throughout it. I do have some really dark reflecting colors on both this far left side and a little bit on the right. So I'm gonna paint in this background of the light, and then I'm gonna move over to my darker browns. Okay, so at this point, this painting still doesn't look like much, but these trees are about to start making that shift into making it look more like a landscape painting that's worthy of sale. And we're going to start off with these trees. Now I've added the cold wax medium. I'm going to start with the dark side, which will be on the right. And I've got a really nice slanted big tree on this left side of the bank. And I've really got to pay attention to the shapes, really get creative with them. And we have the tendency of wanting to paint a tree straight up and down. You got to think about how they actually look. Now this was one of my few times that I've started working with this cold wax medium, and it did dry out the paint, so it was very difficult. I had to put a lot of pressure, as you can see there, just to get paint to go on, especially since I had paint behind this. And that's been a change. That's been something that's difficult to adapt to. But I think that a couple more paintings and I'm really going to have this down. And I can see this cold wax medium coming in a lot of handy in mountain scenes. So I'm hoping to paint some more with this stuff. I like the idea of being able to really between liquid and the cold wax medium, being able to work between a matte finish and a gloss finish within an oil painting, which typically will have a gloss to it naturally. So to be able to add this matte look to a painting is a big deal within the painting arsenal of us as painters. So I'm hoping to be able to master this and really develop a unique style out of it. I know that cold wax mediums are used very much within abstract art. I'm not an abstract painter. I'm not trying to do that, but I do want to be able to morph that in and use it somehow within my own style here as a landscape artist. And you guys are along with me on this journey, so we're going to give it a shot. Within each one of these trees, I'm going to be laying in the dark side first and then the light side. And we'll go back and do the refining later, but we're going to have that tree right there is going to almost double in width, and that's how that's going to go from here on out. So watch as I create these trees. I do want to mention that the base of these trees are going to be extremely important. So we're going to go back and do some refining of the base because there's going to be some really hefty roots that are kind of barely hanging on to this side of this little dirt clod hill that's almost just hovering right above the surface of the water. So just bear with me. That'll be done a little bit later in the process, but these trees are relatively simple to do. It's just a matter of, especially on this scale, it's not too difficult. Just get ready to lay in your color. Now, if you wanted to, you could wait on the background to dry before you painted in the trees, and that would be fine. It actually would probably be better. I didn't do that here, but you wouldn't muddle up your colors too much with the background. I moved to my Raphael Precision Synthetics Sable liner brush, which is my favorite liner brush that I have. I actually have two of them now, and both the exact same size, I believe, which is 2/0 size. I think that's what it's actually shows on the website, and that's the brush I like to use for little bitty details like this. I'm laying in some very muted background trees. These are going to be the same size trees that we have here in the midground, but they're obviously further back. And I'm painting those in, at this point, because now I'm getting an idea of the composition. I can worry about where things would help the painting. Work on the roots of these trees is it looks more intricate than it really is. You're just going to take your liner brush and create some basic shapes. It's a lot like building limbs, except they're going to be a little bit more curved. And of course, if you do a different style of tree, it would be very different. You could change this tree to where it's a cypress tree, and you could have these really beautiful cypress knees. In fact, when I finished this painting, I kind of thought about doing that and really changing this thing up. But I already taken it a pretty good distance. This is actually an oak tree that's hanging out by the water, which is kind of rare. But along this little creek line, there's several oaks, and this thing's barely hanging on. This one on the far right's got a lot of problems. But what I'm doing is just creating little shapes, and to a certain extent, it's a bit random. But also, it's kind of like doing tree leaves or building a tree out. There's controlled chaos within it. And you just kind of continue that in that large mass of color. And we begin work at that point on the water once again. And there's a lot of sparkles in this blue. And these sparkles are very difficult to get for me on a canvas this small. I do have to, there's certain techniques that I try to pull off, and which is I'm not going to leave the strokes in there like I would normally on a larger canvas. I'm actually going to go back in with my Badger brush, my Badger blender, and kind of pull these colors back out just so they're not quite as strong. Now, you could leave them. It's not going to hurt anything. They still would be pretty attractive. I'm going to try my best to stay away from too much of that dark space underneath where the shadow is of the tree. I've also dropped in some darker colors as well, and I'm just going to take that Badger brush and blend this stuff out. So it doesn't change it a ton, but you do get those colors are in there. I thought it needed a big log or something, some kind of big limb just sticking out in the water over here, just to give it some depth to pull the viewer into that portion of the painting. And I just used a very dark, not black, but very dark color mixture of Van Dyke brown, ultramarine blue, and kind of just got a log sticking into the water there. And then you settle it in by drawing those little, or painting in those little white stream marks where the water is being pulled around that limb, and you continue that at places where the water would be turning, where it would be hitting dirt all around the outside, and that seems to settle that stream. At some point, it looks like the stream is just kind of floating without any real definition between that and the land itself. Drawing in or painting in those little sparkle marks really does help. I'm going to do a little bit more work on highlighting these roots. Now you don't want to go too strong with those highlights on the bottom because again they're still in shadow. But up here near the top, it would help if you just draw off a little highlight, and that really helps set part of that tree out a little bit more, gives it a little bit more depth. Really improved that right tree. It's amazing how one stroke very oftentimes can change an entire aspect of a painting. And just doing some little detail work around the painting itself. Little areas where I see it needs some color. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going in with some sap green and I'm going to paint some leaves in. I've got some little limbs hanging out over the water here, and this is early springtime here in Arkansas. And so we do have, even though we've got this really wintry look amongst a lot of these oaks, and these pine trees are still obviously with the green needles, but they're too high in this painting to be able to see the pine needles at the top. But I do have some little twigs and stuff that are budding out along the bank of this creek. And I just go with about 3 different colors. I go in with kind of the medium tone first, and I'm just scrubbing these in. Now, the ideal way to do this is to probably wait for this entire thing to dry and then go back in with your leaves. I didn't do that today. I feel like I can probably pull it off where it looks correct. So I've got the medium tone, then I go back in with a yellow. It's a mixture of the same green. I am going to slightly brighten it, and then I'll go back in with a dark towards the tail end of this process. And there we have the darks in. Need some detail work done along the bluff base. We've got just some reddish dirt clay that's kind of stratified, and that stratification, which is really where you can tell the years and the age of Earth's land, and that's what you can see here as this little creek's torn away at thousands and thousands of years of ground, and we're left over with these little stratification marks. I hope that's the correct term for them. All right, I thought this wasn't in the original picture that I had, but I went ahead and decided I thought it needed some more, something else near the center left. So I put in a pretty big tree right back there. You can see it as I painted that in. My arm was a little bit in the way of me actually painting it. I'm sorry about that. But you go back in, you're just going to take your liner brush. It's going to be a little thicker and a little heavier than most of the other little twigs and branches that are around. And then we're going to go back in with a highlight color and make this thing even wider. This tree to me added a lot. It just showed again more depth as you consider the size of it compared to the trees in the foreground. It just really added a lot of depth. We go back into our highlight color that we've been using throughout this painting. It doesn't change much, even though it's a little bit further in the background. So we just take our liner brush. I'm not going to go all the way to the top on it. Maybe there's another tree back there that's got a shadow casting on the top part of it. And then I changed my mind and decided to put a little strip. So I just didn't get it quite as thick, but yeah. And then I'll work with that same color, maybe put a little ultramarine blue in it and just kind of define this right bank. If you're wondering why my stream marks are going back into this, that's actually the direction that the stream is pulling. If it was coming the other way, all of those stream marks would be coming back towards the perspective of the audience viewing the painting. More refining of this large tree on the right's roots, is I'm actually going to pull one of them totally into the water. We've had so much rain here over the past few days, over the last week really. Had one of the probably biggest floods of since 1945, and that is going to obviously bring a lot more water into a little creek like this. And because of that, some of these roots wouldn't have normally been in the water. Now they are. And I'm just going to draw that one into it using a very dark tone because it's on the farthest inside away from all of that light into that shadow. I'm going to refine some of the trees on the right. This is just a large branch. Don't be afraid to bring trees that are off of the canvas. Don't be afraid to bring branches onto your canvas because that just makes it look even more natural. Then going in, refining the water a little bit more, adding some reddish hints. There's a lot of red gravel underneath in this area. And touching up the shadows, really going to darken these shadows back here. At first I thought they were pretty spot on, and then they just needed more definition. They were too close. I was only about maybe 50 yards away from that little area that I'm painting on now, and that needs definition more so than I had. Not necessarily as defined as the tree bank on the left, but it does need some. Putting a ton of light. Again, this is not a pure white color. It has a lot of yellow and burnt sienna in it, but now a lot of light going in to this right side and center. Still with the liner brush. And these colors are really adding a lot. After I laid in that little bit of brighter light, I thought they needed more yellow in it. So I did go back and create a slightly yellower tone and didn't cover them up totally, but I did go back over them somewhat just to give that hint of, it's not a sunset, but this was a late afternoon sun, so you are going to get some sun tones within that water. Obviously, and then I go back over with the Badger blender. Again, that's a Da Vinci brand brush. You can get those from, I think, Blick. And just being careful, but just blending those lines just slightly. An even stronger yellow tone in the bottom right as we get a bit more defined. And then blend that out slightly. I love the way that looks already. That's really pretty. That may be the best part of the water. But just really switching back and forth between my liner brush and the Badger blender. And that same color, I'm going to put a lot of bright yellow right back there at the back of that creek, and that just creates a ton of light pouring into the back. Love the way that looks. It really changed the painting, especially up against that dark shadow from the tree. Really creates the illusion that there's a little opening back there that's just letting sunlight pour in. When you're working in details this fine on an 8x10, it's just best at this point to stick with the liner. You may go through a lot of brushes, but it's the one you need to use. You could use a number 3, number 2 bristle, but it's still going to be difficult to get that fine of a detail once you press the brush down. Yeah, I really like that bottom right-hand corner where I'm using the Badger. Just to define that right tree, that largest one, a little bit more, I'm going to go in with the darkest of dark colors now, since I'm towards the end of this, and really darken the shadow side. And that looks a lot better. I'm not darkening the whole thing. And I'll do the same thing on the next tree, just to give some real insight as to how large around these are. Maybe a little crevice down here on the bottom of it needs to be darker. And I'll just work some little dark pockets in different spots, trying to see the size of the tree. And we do that throughout the whole bottom left in that mass of color. Anything that's in the deepest shadow, that's where we want to go. I'll bring that log down just a little bit. Finish this off by putting a few sparkles around this extended log with water streaming around it. That's going to be about it for this painting. I may do a few more small details on my own, but I'm going to sign it after it dries. And it's a really unique piece. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Please subscribe if you're enjoying this content. This was a little bit of a challenge, but we'll try to challenge ourselves some more. Have a great day. Keep painting. God bless.